They say love means standing by someone no matter what. But what happens when that love starts to feel like enabling? I'm Jake, and what started as a simple trip to my wife's nephew's graduation has turned into a battle of emotions, health, and hard choices. Would you risk your relationship to draw a line or stay silent and keep the peace? My wife Emily has always struggled with her weight. When we first met, she was already heavier than average, but it never mattered to me. I loved her laugh, the way she lit up when she talked about books, the way she cared so deeply about her family. Her size didn't define her, not to me. But over the years, things changed. She stopped trying, not in the way people say when they're being cruel, but in the quiet, heartbreaking way that happens when someone loses hope. Doctor visits became more frequent. Her blood work came back worse each time. High blood pressure, prediabetes, fatty liver. She'd sit with those papers in her hands and promise, "I'll start next week." I never pushed her. I didn't want to be that kind of partner, the one who makes their love feel conditional. So instead, I supported her the only way I knew how. I started cooking healthier meals, tried to keep junk food out of the house. I'd gently suggest walks, or even just errands we could do together. And when she wanted to talk about losing weight, I listened. But when she didn't, I stayed quiet. You see, I didn't marry her to change her. I married her because I loved her as she was, and still do. But sometimes that love comes with frustration. Quiet, aching frustration. Not because of how she looks, but because I'm scared. I'm scared of waking up one day without her. I'm scared of watching her health crumble while I stand by, hands tied by the very love that keeps me silent. There's also the guilt. Is it wrong that I sometimes wish she'd just try a little harder? That I wish she'd see herself the way I see her? Worth fighting for? Is it selfish to want her to care more about her own well-being? Who am I to judge what trying even looks like for someone fighting an invisible battle with food, shame, and probably pain I can't fully understand? Emily is 5'9" and currently weighs 470 pounds. That number alone doesn't tell you the full story, but it does shape how we live. It affects where we go, what we do, and even how we sit together on the couch. It affects her energy, her confidence, and sometimes our intimacy. She doesn't talk about it often, and when she does, it's usually laced with defeat. "What's the point?" she asked me once, after trying a diet for a week. "I always fail." And that crushed me, but I didn't show it. I just held her hand and told her we'd figure it out together. Because what else can you do when the person you love doesn't believe in themselves? Now more than ever, I find myself asking, how do you support someone without crossing the line into enabling? Where is the line between loving unconditionally and silently watching someone self-destruct? These questions haunt me, and I don't know the answers. All I know is that I love my wife, and I want her to be happy and healthy. But lately, those two things seem more and more at odds. Next month, we're supposed to fly to Virginia for her nephew's graduation. It should be a happy occasion, something to look forward to. But instead, it's become a tipping point. A decision about airplane seats has stirred up something much deeper. And that's where this story really begins. We were sitting at the kitchen table the first time I brought it up, gently, carefully, like I was placing a fragile object between us. Emily had just found a few flight options to Virginia and was excitedly chatting about hotel deals, rental cars, and what kind of gift we should bring for her nephew. I smiled, nodded, played along, but inside my mind kept circling the elephant in the room. I waited for the right moment. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, "have you thought about how we want to handle the plane seating?" She blinked at me, mid-sip of her tea. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, then continued. "Just, you know how tight airplane seats are. I was thinking maybe we could book a second seat, just in case. I'd rather we plan for it ahead of time than have something happen at the gate." Her face went still. Then came the silence, heavy, uncomfortable. I felt it in my chest before she even spoke. "I'm not buying a second ticket, Jake," she said flatly. "If they try to make me, I won't go." I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. That wall was up. I'd seen it before. The shame, the stubbornness, the hurt all tangled together in her voice. Still, I couldn't stop myself from gently pressing. "It's not about you being too big. It's about avoiding embarrassment. I just don't want the airline staff to make a scene or ask you to leave the plane. That would be humiliating, Em. She shook her head. It would be more humiliating to admit I need a second seat, to admit that to myself. And right there, it broke my heart. What do you say to the person you love when their pride is fighting against their peace? How do you convince someone to prepare for a worst-case scenario without making them feel like they're already a failure? For the next few days, we didn't talk about it. We went on with life like nothing had been said, but the tension hovered just beneath the surface. I watched her scroll through flight options without mentioning seatings again. I watched her skip over the seats with extra space or upgraded comfort. And I kept wondering, what happens if we get there and the airline refuses to board her? What if they force her to buy another seat on the spot and it's not available? What if they humiliate her publicly, in front of strangers? We've known about this trip for a year. I brought up the seating issue months ago, not to hurt her, but to give us time to figure it out together. She nodded then, said we'd look at options. But now time's running out. And her refusal to address it feels like she's closing a door that could protect her. I've even considered buying the extra seat myself. I'd make it refundable, just in case. I'd do it quietly without a fight. But something in me resists that. Would I just be sweeping the issue under the rug? Am I protecting her or enabling her? I keep looping back to the same question. What matters more, supporting her comfort or encouraging her growth? And maybe it's selfish, but I'm scared of what this silence is doing to us. I feel like we're drifting into a place where we both know the truth, but neither of us has the courage to face it. All I wanted was for this trip to be a chance for us to reconnect, celebrate her family, and just feel normal again. But now I can't help but wonder if we can't even talk about this. What happens when the real crisis hits? And deep down, I'm starting to realize this trip may not just be about getting on a plane. It might be about whether we're still moving forward together or just standing still, pretending. The silence between us didn't just stay in the conversation. It seeped into everything. Meals got quieter. The jokes we used to toss back and forth felt forced. Even the way she looked at me changed, like part of her was waiting for me to push the issue again, while the other part was daring me to try. And I didn't. I couldn't. Because every time I thought about saying something, I saw the look in her eyes that day at the kitchen table. Not anger, not even disappointment, just defeat. Like she'd already heard every voice that ever judged her, and the last thing she needed was mine joining the chorus. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore what was happening inside me. There was a quiet storm building, a mix of sadness, fear, and yes, a little bit of resentment. I didn't want to feel that. I didn't want to resent the woman I loved because of something as stupid as a plane ticket. But the truth is, it wasn't about the seat anymore. It was about everything that seat represented. Emily had stopped fighting for herself. And while I didn't need her to be perfect, I needed her to want to try. For us, for herself, for the life we kept saying we'd build together. I started asking myself hard questions. Why am I the one trying to keep everything on track? When did I become the only one carrying the emotional weight in this relationship? I know that sounds harsh, maybe even unfair, but it's how I felt. And I hated that I felt that way. I hated myself for letting something like this wedge itself between us. Then one evening while we were watching TV, she turned to me out of nowhere and said, "Do you think I embarrass you?" I was stunned. What? No, Em, of course not. She didn't look at me, just stared at the screen. I've been thinking about that day you brought up the plane ticket. I know you weren't trying to be mean. I don't want to be a burden. Hey, that word, burden, hit me like a punch to the gut. You're not a burden, I said immediately, reaching for her hand. Emily, you're my wife. I love you. This has nothing to do with shame. She finally looked at me, her eyes glassy. But it does. I feel it every time I try to fit in a booth at a restaurant, or when someone stares at me at the grocery store. I don't want to feel that on a plane. I'd rather not go at all than be reminded I take up too much space. I didn't know what to say, because deep down I realized she wasn't just talking about a plane seat. She was talking about life, about how she's slowly stopped feeling like she has a place in it. So I asked her quietly, then what do we do? How do we make this work? She didn't have an answer. And maybe that's the scariest part, that sometimes love isn't enough to fix the silence. That even when you both want to move forward, neither of you knows where to step next. And I started to wonder, how long can a marriage survive in this kind of quiet? At what point does supporting someone start to look like standing still beside them, afraid to move? This trip, this graduation, it's coming fast, and every day we avoid the issue, it grows heavier between us. I'm trying to be patient. I'm trying to be kind. But I'm also trying not to lose myself while loving someone who's lost faith in herself. A few mornings later, I stood in the shower longer than usual, water running over me while my thoughts did laps. I kept replaying her words. I don't want to be a burden. And beneath that, the quiet truth she hadn't said out loud. I already think I am. I stared at my reflection in the foggy mirror, towel around my waist, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't recognize the man staring back. I looked tired, not just physically, but soul tired. Like love was no longer light and warm, it was heavy, worn, almost brittle, and that terrified me. I didn't want to be the kind of husband who fell out of love because things got hard. I didn't want to be another wound in her already bleeding self-worth. But how long could we dance around the same issue without breaking something between us? Later that day, I sat down at my computer and started looking at flights again. I filtered for refundable fares and found a few options that included the possibility of purchasing a second seat discreetly. My fingers hovered over the mouse. Should I just do it? Would she even need to know until we got to the gate? Or would that be worse, stripping away her agency, even with good intentions? That's when I realized the real problem wasn't the seat. It wasn't the flight. It wasn't even the graduation. It was us. We were both avoiding the hard conversation because we were afraid of hurting each other, afraid of what the truth might reveal. Maybe she feared I no longer saw her the way I used to, and maybe I feared that if I really said how I felt, she'd crumble, or worse, walk away. I closed the laptop and sat there in silence for a long time. Then I went downstairs where Emily was reading on the couch. Her face looked tired too. She didn't look up when I sat beside her. I took a breath. Emily, I said softly, can we talk, not about the ticket, not about the flight, about us? She didn't speak, but she set the book down, her fingers still curled around the spine. I feel like I've been walking on eggshells, I continued. Not because I'm afraid of you, but because I love you. And I don't know how to talk about this without making you feel like I don't. Her eyes flicked to mine, quiet and unreadable. I'm scared, I admitted. Not of the flight, not even of what people will think. I'm scared of watching you give up. I'm scared I'll lose you, not because of this trip, but because of what you're carrying that you won't let me help with. Tears welled up in her eyes then, and she whispered, I already feel like I've lost myself. I don't even know who I am anymore. I reached for her hand, held it between both of mine. Then let's find her again. Together. Not for a plane ticket, not for a graduation. For you. Because I want to go through life with you, all of you. But we can't keep pretending this isn't slowly pulling us apart. Have you ever loved someone so much you didn't know how to tell them they were hurting themselves? How do you hold someone up when they keep stepping out of your arms? That was the first time we'd said the hard things. And while nothing was solved in that moment, something changed. We finally stopped pretending. The next morning felt different. Not lighter, not exactly hopeful, but honest. And maybe that was enough for now. Emily and I sat across from each other at breakfast. The quiet was still there, but it wasn't the kind that came from avoidance. It was the kind that followed vulnerability. The kind where words weren't needed right away because everything had already been laid bare the night before. She was the one who finally spoke. If I go, and they say something about the seat, I'm afraid I'll fall apart. I looked at her, my heart aching. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen. I've already looked into refundable options. I'll book the second seat, quietly. No drama, just comfort and peace of mind. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. Instead, she reached for my hand across the table. It's strange, isn't it? How one decision, one seat on a flight, can become the symbol of everything unspoken in a relationship. our fears, our frustrations, our love even. It's not just about Ari Shimanye or money or convenience. It's about being seen, being heard, and not feeling like you're alone in the hard parts of life. I thought back to when we first met. Emily used to dance in the kitchen while cooking, humming along to old soul songs. She used to laugh with her whole body, head thrown back, completely unguarded. Somewhere along the way, she stopped dancing. The laughter dimmed, and I kept hoping it would return on its own if I just waited long enough. But maybe what she needed all this time wasn't for me to wait. Maybe she needed me to show her she was still worth the effort, even when she didn't believe it herself. So I booked the flights that afternoon, 2 seats, one for her and one to give her space, not just physically, but emotionally. A seat to say, you matter, you deserve comfort, and I'm with you every step of the way. When I told her, she just nodded. Her eyes shimmered a little, but she didn't cry. She said, thank you. And that was it. That was enough. And maybe I am enabling her in some small way. Maybe I'm making it easier for her to stay where she is instead of moving forward. But I also know that growth doesn't come from shame. It doesn't bloom in the soil of silence or blame. It comes when you feel safe enough to try again. This trip is still happening. We're still going to Virginia. I'll be standing beside her at her nephew's graduation, holding her hand. And if anyone looks, if anyone judges, I'll be right there to remind her that their eyes don't define her worth. We're not fixed. There's no magical turning point, but there's movement again, a slow, uncertain movement, but it's something. And in a marriage, sometimes that's what you cling to. So now I ask you, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you hold the line and risk the damage, or take a step toward peace, even if it means carrying the weight for a little while longer? I don't have all the answers. I'm just a man trying to love his wife the best way he knows how, even when that means booking 2 seats for one heart. What would you do in Jake's shoes? Would you buy the second seat to protect someone you love, even if it feels like enabling? Or would you stand firm, hoping they choose change for themselves? Jake is carrying so much alone, trying to love gently while silently hurting. If his story moved you, let him know he's not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words could bring him comfort. And please like the video, Serrano, and subscribe to the channel so Jake sees that people out there truly care. Sometimes knowing strangers understand can mean more than you realize.